More than 40 years on, Ringo Starr has relaunched his fellow Beatles campaign for world peace.
I've got a bit of a... Well, I haven't got a bad throat, but the doctor thinks I have. He wants me to get me tonsils out.
Ringo Starr, the iconic drummer of the Beatles, was known for his upbeat drumming and charming personality. He has remained a beloved figure in the music industry for decades. At 84, Ringo Starr has finally broken his silence with a bombshell revelation about Yoko Ono being the true cause of the band's breakup. His new confession could change what we knew of one of the greatest musical splits in history. Could Ringo's claims be true? Join us in this video as we uncover Ringo Starr's confession about how Yoko Ono destroyed the Beatles. But before we dive in, let us first explore Ringo's early life, his career, and his remarkable journey of joining the Beatles. Early life. Richard Starkey, known to many as Ringo Starr, was born on July 7, 1940 in Dingle, a working-class area of Liverpool. He was the only child of Richard Starkey and Elsie Glee, who both worked as confectioners. His parents had a deep love for music and dancing, especially swing, and they often enjoyed the local ballroom scene before Ringo, whom they affectionately called Richie, was born. Once Richie was born, his parents' lively social life came to a halt. Elsie became highly protective of her son, almost to the point of being overbearing. Meanwhile, his father, known as Big Richie, began losing interest in family life. He spent much of his time in pubs, drinking and dancing, sometimes disappearing for days. This behavior strained the family. In 1944, to save money, they moved to another part of Dingle called Admiral Grove. Shortly after the move, Ringo's parents separated and divorced within the year. Ringo later mentioned that he had few memories of his father, who made little effort to stay in touch. Big Richie only visited him a few times after the divorce. Elsie struggled financially, receiving minimal support from her ex-husband. She took on several cleaning jobs before securing a position as a barmaid, which she held for 12 years to provide for herself and her son. Ringo's early life was filled with hardships. At 6, he underwent an appendectomy, but complications arose when he developed a severe infection called peritonitis. This made him gravely ill, and he even slipped into a coma for a few days. He had to stay in the hospital for a year to recover and couldn't live with his family during that time. When Ringo finally left the hospital in May 1948, his mother kept him home to recover. This caused him to miss a lot of school, and by the time he was 8, he struggled with reading and math. This made him feel different from other kids at school, and he often skipped classes to play at Sefton Park. Fortunately, a kind neighbor named Marie Maguire Crawford, who was like a big sister to Ringo, began tutoring him twice a week. With her help, Ringo started to catch up with his classmates. However, in 1953, he fell ill again, this time with tuberculosis. He had to stay in a sanatorium, a specialized hospital for long-term illnesses, for 2 years to recover. Despite these setbacks, Ringo's early life experiences shaped his resilience. His love for music, passed down from his parents, remained strong. This passion eventually led him to become one of the most famous drummers in the world as a member of the Beatles. During his hospital stay, the medical staff wanted to keep the children active and prevent boredom. They encouraged patients to join the hospital band. This is where Ringo first discovered percussion instruments. Without a real drum, he improvised by using a makeshift mallet made from a cotton bobbin to tap on the cabinets next to his bed. This simple activity sparked his interest in drumming. Ringo's passion for drumming grew quickly. A kind neighbor named Crawford gifted him a copy of the Alan Ainsworth song, "Bedtime for Drums," to help him recover. Ringo later recalled, "I was in the hospital band, that's where I really started playing. I never wanted anything else after that." Despite being given other instruments like a mandolin, banjo and harmonica by his grandparents, and having a piano at home, Ringo wasn't interested in any of them. Drums were the only thing he wanted to play. Ringo attended St. Silas, a Church of England primary school near his home. His classmates nicknamed him Lazarus because he had been so sick and then recovered. Later, he went to Dingle Vale Secondary Modern School, where he excelled in art, drama, and practical subjects like mechanics. However, due to the time he spent in the hospital, he fell behind academically and couldn't take the 11+ qualifying exams needed for grammar school. On April 17, 1954, Ringo's mother married Harry Graves at the Register Office on Mount Pleasant in Liverpool. Harry, originally from London, had moved to Liverpool after his first marriage ended. Harry, who loved big band music, introduced Ringo to singers like Dinah Shore, Sarah Vaughan, and Billy Daniels. After his long hospital stay, Ringo didn't return to school. Instead, he preferred staying home, listening to music, and playing along by drumming on biscuit tins with sticks. His love for drumming continued to deepen during this period. Ringo's early life was filled with challenges. Beatles biographer Bob Spitz described his upbringing as a Dickensian chronicle of misfortune. The houses in his neighborhood were small, poorly ventilated, and patched together with crumbling plaster walls. Many families, including Ringo's, struggled to survive. Children often spent time at Prince's Park to escape the dirty, soot-filled air of their neighborhood. The area was also plagued by violent crime, which was a constant concern for the residents. Ringo has said, "You kept your head down, your eyes open, and you didn't get in anybody's way." In late 1955, after returning home from the sanatorium, Ringo started working. However, he lacked motivation and discipline, and his early job attempts didn't go well. He briefly worked as a railway worker for British Rail, hoping to get some warm clothes since the job came with a suit. Unfortunately, he couldn't pass the physical exam and was laid off, receiving unemployment benefits instead. His next job was as a waiter on a day boat that traveled from Liverpool to North Wales. However, fearing conscription into military service, he quit the job because he didn't want the Royal Navy to consider him fit for sea work. In mid-1956, Harry Graves helped Ringo secure a job as an apprentice machinist at Henry Hunt & Son, a company that made school equipment in Liverpool. While working there, Ringo became friends with Roy Trafford, who shared his passion for music. Roy introduced him to skiffle music, and Ringo quickly became a big fan. So how did Ringo find interest in drums, and what confession did he make of Yoko Ono being the destroyer of the Beatles? Keep watching to find out. Early musical career. During their lunch breaks at the manufacturing plant, Ringo and Roy would sneak down to the cellar to practice songs. Trafford played the guitar while Ringo made noise on anything he could find, like a box, a biscuit tin, or the backs of chairs. They were soon joined by another neighbor and co-worker, Eddie Miles, a guitarist. Together, they formed the Eddie Miles Band. Later, the band was renamed Eddie Clayton and the Clayton Squares, after a well-known Liverpool landmark. The band played popular skiffle songs like Rock Island Line and Walking Cane. Ringo used a thimble to rake across a washboard, creating simple but exciting rhythms. He also loved dancing, just like his parents had. Ringo and Roy even took dance lessons for a short time, which helped them enjoy nights out on the town. On Christmas Day 1957, Ringo's stepfather, Harry Graves, gave him a second-hand drum kit. It was basic, with just a snare drum, a bass drum, and a makeshift cymbal made from a rubbish bin lid. But it was enough for Ringo to start really learning how to play the drums. This new skill made the Eddie Clayton Band more popular, and they began getting better gigs around town. However, as American rock and roll gained popularity in the UK, the skiffle craze started to fade. In November 1959, Ringo joined a new band called Al Caldwell's Texans. This group was looking to transition from skiffle to rock and roll and needed a drummer with a proper drum kit. They changed their name several times, first to the Raging Texans, then to Jetstorm and the Raging Texans, and finally to Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. Around this time, Ringo started calling himself Ringo Starr, inspired by the rings he wore and to give himself a bit of a country and western vibe. Ringo's solo singing performances were known as Star Time. By early 1960, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes had become one of Liverpool's top bands. In May, they got a significant break, a 3-month residency at a Butlins holiday camp in Wales. Initially, Ringo hesitated to take the gig since it meant ending his nearly 5-year apprenticeship as a machinist. But he decided to go for it, and it turned out to be a great decision. The Butlins job led to other opportunities, including a tour of U.S. Air Force bases in France. However, Ringo later mentioned that he didn't enjoy the experience much due to tensions between the French and the British. The Hurricanes were doing so well that when they were first offered a residency in Hamburg, Germany, they initially turned it down because of their commitment to Butlins. Eventually, they accepted and joined the Beatles at Bruno Koschmider's Kaiserkeller Club on October 1, 1960. This was where Ringo first met John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. The Hurricanes were the headliners, and the Beatles were the opening act, earning less money. While in Hamburg, Ringo occasionally played with the Beatles. On October 15, 1960, he played drums with John, Paul, and George for the first time, recording the song Summertime with them and Hurricane singer Lou Walters. During this period, Ringo also met Tony Sheridan, a musician who was so impressed by Ringo's drumming skills that he asked Ringo to leave the Hurricanes and join his band. What put Ringo in the spotlight and announced him to the world? Let's find out, joining the Beatles. In January 1962, Ringo Starr decided to leave Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. He briefly played with Tony Sheridan in Hamburg before returning to the Hurricanes for a third season at Butlins. However, on August 14th, Ringo received an invitation from John Lennon to join the Beatles. Just 2 days later, the Beatles' manager Brian Epstein fired their drummer Pete Best. Epstein informed Best that the band wanted Ringo to replace him. Best later recalled Epstein saying, "I've got some bad news for you. The boys want you out and Ringo in." Best mentioned that George Martin wasn't pleased with his drumming, and the band felt he didn't fit in. Ringo's first performance with the Beatles took place on August 18, 1962, at a dance in Port Sunlight. The next day he played at the Cavern Club, where Pete Best's fans protested by chanting, "Pete forever, Ringo never," outside the club in Best's house. George Harrison even received a black eye from an angry fan. Due to the hostility from Best's supporters, Epstein temporarily hired a bodyguard for Ringo. Ringo's first recording session with the Beatles happened on September 4, 1962. He later said that producer George Martin thought he was crazy and couldn't play because he was trying to handle both percussion and drums simultaneously. For their next recording session on September 11th, Martin brought in session drummer Andy White to play on the Beatles' first single, "Love Me Do." Ringo played only the tambourine. Ringo was worried, thinking that's the end, they're doing a Pete Best on me. However, Martin clarified that he just didn't know Ringo well enough to take any risks yet. By November 1962, Beatles fans had accepted Ringo, and some even began asking for him to sing. He soon began receiving as much fan mail as the other Beatles, which boosted his confidence in his role. Ringo felt fortunate to be in sync with the other band members, saying, "I had to be or I wouldn't have lasted. I had to join them as people as well as a drummer." His income came from a small percentage of Lennon and McCartney's publishing company, Northern Songs, and a 1/4 share of Beatles Limited, the corporation that managed the band's earnings from concerts. Ringo enjoyed the nightlife, recalling, "I lived in nightclubs for 3 years. It used to be a non-stop party, and he was often praised for his dancing skills." By 1963, the Beatles' popularity in Britain had skyrocketed. Their second single, "Please Please Me," followed "Love Me Do" into the UK charts. A successful TV appearance on Thank Your Lucky Stars further boosted their sales and radio play. By the end of the year, Beatlemania had overtaken the UK. In February 1964, the Beatles performed on The Ed Sullivan Show in New York City, watched by a record 73 million viewers. Ringo later said, "In the States, I know I went over well. It knocked me out to see and hear the kids waving for me. I'd made it as a personality. Our appeal is that we're ordinary lads." Ringo inspired several songs, including "I Wanna Kiss Ringo Goodbye" and "Ringo for President" in 1964. "I Love Ringo" lapel pins became the best-selling Beatles merchandise. The prominent Ludwig logo on Ringo's drum kit also boosted the company's popularity in North America. During concerts, the Beatles continued their Star Time routine, with John Lennon placing a microphone in front of Ringo's drum kit for his spotlight moment. Ringo Starr's performances consistently stirred excitement among audiences, especially when John Lennon would place a microphone in front of his drum kit, signaling Star Time. This routine led to eruptions of screams from the crowd. When the Beatles made their film debut in A Hard Day's Night, Ringo's portrayal was met with critical acclaim. His delivery of deadpan one-liners and expressive non-speaking scenes, orchestrated by director Richard Lester, won praise. Interestingly, these scenes were arranged due to Ringo's lack of sleep from partying the night before filming. Manager Brian Epstein attributed Ringo's widespread appeal to his quaintness. Following the release of the Beatles' second film, Help, in 1965, Ringo's popularity soared, even winning him a Melody Maker poll against his fellow bandmates for his performance. During a 1964 interview with Playboy, John Lennon jokingly mentioned that Ringo had replaced Pete Best when Best was ill, to which Ringo humorously replied, "Best took little pills to make him ill." Best later filed a libel suit against Ringo, which dragged on for 4 years before being settled in Best's favor. In June 1964, as the Beatles were preparing for a world tour, Ringo fell seriously ill with tonsillitis and pharyngitis. He was temporarily replaced by session drummer Jimmy Nicol for 5 concerts. Ringo rejoined the band in Melbourne on June 15th, but later confessed that he feared being permanently replaced during his illness. That same year in August, the Beatles met American songwriter Bob Dylan, who introduced them to cannabis. Ringo was the first to try it, while the others were initially hesitant. On February 11, 1965, Ringo married Maureen Cox, whom he had met in 1962. By this time, the intense pressure of Beatlemania had taken its toll on him. Before a show in Montreal, Ringo even received a death threat, prompting him to position his cymbals vertically for protection. The relentless stress also began affecting the Beatles' performances. Ringo lamented, "We were turning into such bad musicians, there was no groove to it." Despite this, the Beatles continued to create iconic music. In August 1966, they released Revolver, which included the hit song Yellow Submarine, the only British #1 single with Ringo as the lead singer. Later that month, the Beatles decided to stop touring due to the mounting pressures. Ringo remarked, "We gave up touring at the right time. 4 years of Beatlemania were enough for anyone." By December, he had moved to a larger estate called Sunny Heights in Surrey, near Lennon. For the Beatles' 1967 album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Ringo sang lead vocals on With a Little Help from My Friends. Despite the album's massive success, Ringo often felt like a session musician. He was frequently directed on how to play, and his inability to compose new material led to his input being minimized during recording sessions. During his downtime, he focused on improving his guitar skills. After Epstein's death in August 1967, the Beatles embarked on a poorly received film project, Magical Mystery Tour. Ringo's growing interest in photography led to him being billed as the film's director of photography. In February 1968, Ringo became the first Beatle to perform on another artist's show without the others. He sang Act Naturally and performed a duet with Cilla Black on her TV show. In November 1968, Apple Records released The White Album, inspired by the band's recent time with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi at his ashram in India. Ringo recorded his first Beatles song, Don't Pass Me By, but left after 10 days due to allergies and sensitivities to the local food. Relations within the Beatles began to deteriorate during the recording of The White Album. Ringo grew frustrated with McCartney's overbearing approach and Lennon's passive-aggressive behavior. Following a particularly difficult session, Ringo briefly quit the band and went on holiday to Sardinia. During this period, Ringo wrote Octopus's Garden. When he returned to the studio 2 weeks later, he was warmly welcomed back by Harrison, who had covered his drum kit in flowers. Despite this gesture, the Beatles' fourth film, Let It Be, further strained relationships within the band. On August 20, 1969, the Beatles gathered for the final time at Abbey Road Studios. A month later, Lennon announced he was leaving the band, though the public only learned of this when McCartney officially announced his departure on April 10, 1970. How did Ringo's career change after he left the Beatles? Keep watching to find out. Ringo's successful solo career. After the Beatles disbanded, Ringo Starr continued to enjoy significant success as a solo artist. His post-Beatles career saw several notable achievements, including the US top 10 hit It Don't Come Easy, and #1 singles like Photograph and You're 16. In the UK, his single Back Off Boogaloo reached #2, marking one of his most successful releases in the region. His 1973 album Ringo was a major success, achieving top 10 status in both the UK and the US. Beyond his music career, Starr made his mark in television. He was featured in numerous documentaries, hosted TV shows, and narrated the first two series of the children's program Thomas and Friends. He also portrayed Mr. Conductor in the PBS children's series Shining Time Station. Since 1989, Starr has maintained an active touring schedule with various lineups of Ringo Starr and his all-star band. Starr's drumming style, which prioritized feel over technical prowess, had a profound impact on the drumming community. He influenced many drummers to approach their playing from a more compositional perspective. His techniques, such as the matched grip, tuning drums lower, and using muffling devices on tonal rings, became influential in modern drumming. Starr considers his performance on the Beatles' track Rain as his finest recorded work. In recognition of his contributions to music, he was inducted into the Modern Drummer Hall of Fame in 1999. Named the fifth greatest drummer of all time by Rolling Stone readers in 2011, and inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, first as a Beatle in 1988, and later as a solo artist in 2015. In 2018, he was appointed a Knight Bachelor in the New Year Honors for his services to music. But what exactly was Ringo Starr's life beyond the spotlight? Keep watching to find out. Ringo Starr's personal life. Starr met hairdresser Maureen Cox in 1962, the same week he joined the Beatles. They married in February 1965. Beatles manager Brian Epstein was the best man, and Starr's stepfather Harry Graves and fellow Beatle George Harrison were witnesses. Their marriage inspired the novelty song Treat Him Tender, Maureen by the Chiclets. The couple had 3 children: Zach, born September 13, 1965, Jason, born August 19, 1967, and Lee, born November 11, 1970. In 1971, Starr bought Lennon's home, Tittenhurst Park in Sunning Hill, Berkshire, and moved his family there. Starr and Cox divorced in 1975 after Starr's repeated infidelities. Cox passed away from leukemia at the age of 48 in 1994. Starr met actress Barbara Bach in 1980 while filming Caveman. They married at Marylebone Town Hall on April 27, 1981. In 1985, he became the first Beatle to be a grandfather with the birth of Zach's daughter, Tasha Jane Starkey. Zach, also a drummer, spent time with The Who's Keith Moon during Starr's frequent absences and has performed with his father during all-star band tours. Starr has 8 grandchildren, 2 from Zach, 3 from Jason, and 3 from Lee. In 2016, he became the first Beatle to be a great-grandfather. Starr and Bach divide their time between homes in Cranley, Surrey, Los Angeles, and Monte Carlo. He was listed as number 56 in the Sunday Times Rich List 2011, with an estimated personal wealth of £150 million. In 2012, he was considered the wealthiest drummer in the world. In 2014, Starr put his 200-acre Surrey estate, Ridinghurst in Cranley, up for sale, including its Grade 2 listed Jacobean house. Despite this, he still owns a property in Chelsea, London, and continues to split his time between London and Los Angeles. In December 2015, Starr and Bach auctioned personal and professional items through Julian's Auctions in Los Angeles. The collection featured Starr's first Ludwig Black Oyster Pearl drum kit, instruments from Harrison, Lennon, and Mark Bolan, and a first pressing copy of the Beatles' White Album, numbered 00000001. The auction raised over $9 million, with part of the proceeds going to the Lotus Foundation, a charity founded by Starr and Bach. In 2016, Ringo Starr voiced his support for the UK's withdrawal from the European Union, stating he thought it was a great idea but had doubts about its recent progress. By 2017, he expressed impatience for Britain to proceed with Brexit, emphasizing that being in control of the country was a positive move. In October 2021, Starr was named in the Pandora Papers, which exposed secret financial dealings among politicians and celebrities using tax havens to avoid paying taxes. Starr is a vegetarian and, as confirmed by Mary McCartney, is allergic to garlic and onions. He practices daily meditation and adheres to his life motto and catchphrase, peace and love. Now let's see what Ringo Starr finally confesses at 84. At 84, Ringo Starr finally confesses Yoko Ono destroyed the Beatles. The Beatles' narrative shifted dramatically with Yoko Ono's arrival, significantly altering the band's dynamics. Ono, a Japanese multimedia artist, singer-songwriter, and peace activist, became a central figure in John Lennon's life. Her avant-garde approach to art and unconventional lifestyle contrasted sharply with the more traditional views of the Beatles, creating tension. Ono's influence over Lennon was profound. She became his confidant, collaborator, and muse, which led Lennon to increasingly distance himself from his bandmates. Her frequent presence in the studio served as a constant reminder of this shift, contributing to growing resentment among the other Beatles. Paul McCartney, in particular, felt alienated as he had shared leadership with Lennon. The band's once smooth and collaborative creative process, marked by disagreements and power struggles, began to unravel. Ringo Starr recalls the heightened tension during the recording of the White Album. Ono's persistent presence and involvement in Lennon's artistic decisions made the studio atmosphere increasingly toxic. The other members perceived her influence as intrusive, exacerbating their existing frustrations. The band, already strained by the pressures of fame and the expectations following their immense success, found themselves more divided than ever. This period marked the beginning of the end for the Beatles, setting the stage for their eventual breakup. The Beatles, once a close-knit group of friends, experienced a profound shift as internal conflicts deepened. Ringo Starr's emotional reflections on this period reveal the deep scars left by the band's tumultuous final years. The recording of the White Album was a turning point, marked by escalating disagreements that underscored the growing rifts among the members. Ono's presence intensified the tension, with her influence on Lennon creating a challenging atmosphere for the rest of the band. Ringo's brief departure from the band during these sessions exemplified the unbearable strain he felt as he grappled with feelings of being sidelined and unappreciated. His return, prompted by Lennon, did little to resolve the underlying issues. Ringo's confessions offer a poignant look into the emotional toll of this period. He speaks of the heartbreak of witnessing friendships deteriorate and seeing the band he cherished fall apart. The once unified group became fractured, with members increasingly pursuing their own agendas. The trust that had underpinned their success eroded, giving way to suspicion and resentment. Ringo Starr's recent revelations provide a deeply emotional perspective on the Beatles' final years. The band's journey from unity to division, exacerbated by Ono's influence, serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of even the strongest relationships. His candid reflections highlight the enduring impact of these conflicts, leaving scars that persisted long after the band's disintegration. Beyond the internal strife that plagued the Beatles, Ringo Starr's personal battles added another layer of complexity to his story. His struggle with alcoholism, followed by a difficult journey to sobriety, underscores his resilience. Amid the chaos surrounding him, Ringo managed to navigate his path to recovery, emerging stronger and more determined. Ringo's recent confession, which reignites discussions about Yoko Ono's role in the band's breakup, provides a poignant insight into the emotional toll on him and his bandmates. His acknowledgement that Ono's influence was a significant factor in the disintegration of the Beatles is both shocking and heartbreaking. It reveals the depth of the turmoil that affected not just the band's dynamics, but also Ringo's personal well-being. Despite these challenges, Ringo's story is one of remarkable resilience, passion, and redemption. He reflects on the pain and struggles of those tumultuous years, but also celebrates the triumphs and unforgettable moments that shaped his life and career. His recent revelations add new layers to his narrative, illustrating the complex interplay of personal and professional challenges he faced. Through all the upheaval, Ringo's spirit remains unbroken. His journey highlights his enduring legacy as one of the greatest drummers of all time, embodying a narrative of overcoming adversity and achieving personal triumph amidst a backdrop of professional chaos. What are your thoughts about Ringo's revelation? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.